But you see, Central Bank of Nigeria has continued to, well, let me just start it with this way. FX exposure has continued to be a challenge, not just for the regular, sectors of the economy, but also the oil and gas. And then you mentioned that most of these companies, particularly Seplat, because of the gas challenges, and in some cases, repatriation of their proceeds has also been a challenge for them. But now that we see the constant intervention of the Central Bank of Nigeria into the market, about 760, let me get that figure right, over $700 million that was sold last week by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And now today there's going to be, at least for this week, short tenured forwards of 7 to 30 days maturity. How much of an effect is this going to have on the sector, if any?
Well, for the downstream, for the upstream players, even the downstream, they have FX exposure, definitely. And that's because some of their debts are FX denominated. Maybe not repatriation, because Seplat is largely, indigenous company, same thing with Oando. But the fact that they have to service some of their debts in FX, they will need enough liquidity to do that. But I think CBN is looking at, supporting many of the players in the oil and gas space because of the strategic nature of the products they, are producing is. So, yeah, I think they will continue the dialogue. CBN has been giving them some, how would I put it, preference in terms of that. So, yeah, liquidity is a challenge. What I think people should also note in terms of this FX crisis is that because of the nature, CBN is trying recently, as we've seen, I think they've been able to, more or less chase or, create panic in the heart of the speculators. But of course, there are still the genuine people that are in need of FX that are yet to be met. But even those, many of them will not be met immediately. So we need a lot of time lag. The only problem is the transparency with which we do that, because I keep hearing reports of those that have been on queue for a long time not being met. I was thinking that those people will first of all be attended to before we start looking at those that just got on the queue. So I think it's the way we want to go about this that is really important. But I think this is a very serious crisis that can't be solved within a very short period of time. There has to be a framework for the CBN to find a way. But I think ultimately, after the prices have been converged, there should be a way to also think about to reopen the market so that we can have more supply apart from just the CBN.
But don't you think the market is transparent enough as it is?
Well, transparent enough as it is a function of who is given what. At the moment, CBN is the only one supplying FX, right? So if you are the only one, and that simply means you determine who gets what and at what time. So if I have a queue, a list of people, now, what determines who gets what first? Now, if there are still complaints of, some people being on the queue for a long time and not getting, why that some people perceive to just join the queue to have, then I want to question how, so, we are not sure how things are done over there, but, there's a need for a lot of information out there as regard to how the framework is working.
All right, so that's quite a lot for investors to chew on, because they're still taking a look at the central bank and its FX intervention in the market. They're taking a look at other macroeconomic variables as well, and they've got their own in-house, issues to sort out. But this week we've got only 4 trading days, and what do you think likely would shape oil and gas stocks this week? Well,
I think for oil and gas stocks, most especially those in the stream, and there's a lot of expectation as to whether the government is going to do another reform in the sector as to adjust prices or not. But largely, performance going forward is going to be soft this week. It's just 4 days. But for the quarter, I think investors are more interested in what is going to happen to the Q1 result that should start coming in. We've seen some moderation in inflation. There's a likelihood, of course, FX has also started converging. Production in the Niger Delta have, improved. Oil prices are stabilizing despite the ups and downs we've seen recently, but it's still well above $50. So it seems like, yes, somehow there are some subtle, improvement in key macroeconomic, variables in the system. So I as an investor, will want to start seeing how does this translate into the key operating metrics of many of these companies. How does it affect their performance then? I want to see how I can make, an investment decision that will last for the next 9 months, to determine which stock should I cherry pick on at the moment.
So talking about stock to cherry pick on, Forte Oil is like the poster boy for oil and gas stocks listed on Nigerian Stock Exchange, and is expected, to be one of the early comers in terms of first
Q1.
quarter results.
Yeah.
What's your expectation from them?
Well, we expect it to be largely different from what they did in Q4. I think their revenue will continue to grow. Many of them are benefiting from the reform that happened in May. So maybe not a lot of difference, but I want to see strength in terms of their efficiency, because for many of the domestic players, efficiency remained, because I want to see what happened to operating cost as well as the cost to sales margin. But with FX, we also want to see how that translates into their cost to sales margin. If that shows an improvement, then maybe full year is going to be a better year for the sector as a whole.
So, Olawale, let me just box you into a corner. You're mostly bullish about how the oil and gas stocks will be like this week, even though we just have 4 days of trade.
Well, maybe not mostly bullish, because key players there saw a rally last week, the likes of Owando. So there's a likelihood for some some profit taken in those ones. But the ones that didn't rally as much, maybe investors might want to just pick. But this week is a little tricky.
Okay, so for you, your cherry pick will be which ones? Because corn oil, MRS, those two basically haven't really seen so much. So if you're looking at cherry picking, you definitely pick the big weights: Forte Oil, Mobil, Total, Seplat.
I think Mobil and Total are actually overpriced at the moment. I'll probably, if I have enough time to wait, I'll probably do an Owando.
All right. Olawale, let's anchor the conversation here. Thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. Business Morning continues in just a moment. Bosun is back with me in the studios as we continue to talk about the central bank's recent or constant intervention into the FX markets. Stay with us.